to give you a brief overview of what context is all about, if you come right here, you can just check Google for what is React context. So this is one explanation I think will be of use directly from the documentation of React. It says context provide a way to pass data through the component tree without having to pass the props down manually at every level. In a typical React application, data is passed top down, parent to child via props, but such usage can be cumbersome for certain types of props that are required by many components within our application. Context provide a way to share values like this between components without having to explicitly pass a prop through every level of the tree. So you can see, so it's just a way of you making some values available to all your components. Like just the components as your navigation bar, the buttons, the pages, each of the model that we are using. So components just a way of you making values, making variables available to each of your components that make up your React application, making the values available to them without having to pass them manually from parent to child. So you can just make it available to them generally all at one go, and you'll be seeing that in practical as we practically implement it. So what we are going to be doing is that we create a folder that we are going to be using to house our context. So you know what context is all about now. So, but it's better seen than say. So let's try to see it before so that we understand it better. So let's just create context here. Let's call it supply chain context JavaScript file. So now we are going to be declaring this as our client, since it will not be a client server, it will not be server component, server side component. So we are going to tell it to use client. So definitely if you are using context, then you need to say create context from React. So this will create the context for you so that it allows you to pass your file or values all around in your application. So I'll say use context, and also we are going to be using state. That's to keep some, and also we want some actions to be performed when our page load. We are going to be using the useEffect functionality for that. So, and also since we want to use our API to communicate with our smart contracts, we are going to be needing a library that allows us to do that. And the library that allows us to do that is the ethers library. We also use it in our blockchain folder. So we are going to be needing it right here in the front end of our application. And what you just need to do now is for you to just make sure you are in the front end of your application, in the main folder, not in the blockchain folder now. So I'll just do npm install ethers. npm install ethers. That will allow us to install ethers. While we install ethers, so I'll just import the contract data. This is what I'm referring to as the contract. Let me just close everything. So you can always save some data here. This is what we need as our contract data, our smart contract data. So just leave this folder that I'm currently in the context folder. This is the file I'm working with now. I need to leave this folder so that I can enter the contract folder and I can get my supply chain.json file, because that's where I have my address, that's where I have my API that I need to interact with my smart contracts. So just do contracts, then I'll do supply chain.json. Then I need ethers too, so I can, since I've been able to install it, ethers from ethers. So once I've been able to do that, so let's go ahead to create our context. So I'll just say contracts const supply chain supply chain context. I'll just create a context. Allow me to share values. So I'll just say const. I'll create another function, supply chain. So this is what supply chain provider. Should be an arrow function. Because I need to pass the children to it. Because this is what we house my entire React application. So I need to pass children to this. Then you can then come and export supply chain provider. Supply chain provider. Rather than defining the exports here, let's just put the exports here. Let's just do what, right? So since initially we are going to be needing the user to have MetaMask, once they have MetaMask, we want them to be able to connect their wallets. So all we just need to do initially is to just say that. Let's just say needs the initial function to be an asynchronous function. It's just function that performs it takes some time to perform, so but we just need to wait for it. So and while we are waiting for it, we can also be doing some other thing, but we need to wait for the result before we proceed with whatever we need to proceed with. Right, so we want to check if the user have MetaMask installed, because we are going to be needing it for application Ethereum, Windows.Ethereum. If it's not undefined, then we want to say const new provider. The new provider is equal to new browser provider window to get the MetaMask. This is a good way to get the MetaMask. So Windows.Ethereum. So the new signer. The new signer is equal to with new provider. With the new provider. So I want to get the signer. This is, don't forget we use MetaMask to digitally sign our transaction. And also we want to get the contract, smart contract supply chain. Supply chain to be equals to new contracts. So you open this, then you have your contract data. The first thing should be your address. Don't forget you have your address here. You have your address here. So the first thing should be your address. Put this in front. Then you also need your contract data, the API. The second thing should be your API. And the next thing should be the person that is currently signing the transaction. The new signer. So once you have been able to do that, then I want to set, this will give you who should be the provider. That's your MetaMask. Signer, that's the address. Then the smart contract that you want the signer to interact with. So let's define some variables that will be changing regularly. So we want the signer set. We have seen most of this when we are working with our front end. useState none const provider. So the provider, the MetaMask. So what should be the provider? We want it to be MetaMask. So useState initially should be none. So what this is just doing is just that if you want to update it, this should be small. So this should be the same thing as this, just that you should start with capital letter. If you have to take care of the rest, this should also be the same thing as this, just that you should start with capital letter. So what this is just doing is just that it's updating. It's just the way you can say saying const name is equals to Timmy. So initially you can say, okay, this is the value. Later you can update it and say, okay, it's not Timmy again, it is John. Later you can say it's not John again, it is Peter. Later you can say it's not Peter again, you can say it is Amos. Later you can say it's not Amos again, later you can say it's Abel. You can keep changing the value. So when you need to change, this is, if you need to use the variable, you use this. This I need to use the value. If I get the value now, the value will be none because initially it is none. So it's just like setting this as initially nothing. So if I need to update the value that is here, I'll just say set. So I'll use this function to update the value. Initially it is none. So if later I want to change the value to, for example, I want to change it to MetaMask, for example. So this is how to change the value. So once I change the value, if I read it again, instead of it to be none now, it will now be MetaMask. So that is how that will work. It's a React functionality. So the next thing we also need to set, you can just shift alt down arrow. So I'll just do this, do Ctrl D, and I will just change this to contract and press escape and just change this to the uppercase. Do the same thing again, highlight it, do Ctrl D, change this to accounts, then press the escape key. Everything should initially be none. So now that we have that, we are good. So we can then now say initially we want to set our, forget, after we have checked the, so it should still be inside the if statement. So we now want to set our provider. Set our provider to this new provider. Instead of it to be none, to set it to this new provider. So we want to set the signer. To set the signer to this new signer. So the contracts want to set it to the supply chain. Now that we have that, you also want to try and check if MetaMask is connected. You can just try to connect the user by default. But we are still going to allow them to connect their accounts, but instead of having to connect every time they refresh the app, then let's just connect them by default. Ethereum.request. The method is does accounts, then if there's an account, let's just check if there's an account, just go to the 0, then we want to set accounts, the current accounts in the 0. So once you have been able to do that, otherwise you can just catch the error. To be console error. You can just log the error. Be failed to fetch the connected accounts. Alright, so just log the error. Now that we have that, you know that we are actually checking if the user is connected to, if there's MetaMask. So otherwise, if they don't have MetaMask, just tell them through an alert. Let's just use the inbuilt browser alerts. Just tell them to please you need to install MetaMask. So once we have that, then we should be good to go. So this function should be a function that should be called once the user reload the page and once they hit right here on the page, because they need it to do most of their interaction. So I'll just do useEffect. useEffect is actually a function in React that is used to call. So once the page reload, once an action change, then whatever you put inside this useEffect will be called again. So because you don't want infinite loop, you should also have this. So initially we want to always call the init function. So this useEffect is just once I reload the page, by default call this function. So let's say every time the account change, for example, let's say every time this value of account change, I want to always be calling this function, then I can set this account. But if I don't, it does not depend on anything, then I should just put the array as empty. But this array must be there, otherwise your page will have an infinite loop of calling the function again and again.